What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be discussing defensive rankings for the 2025 fantasy football season. I will be going through the defenses that I like the most in this draft, ones that I would be trying to reach for, ones that you might want to be avoiding because I think they're not great value for where they're being drafted, and where there's great undrafted value too, that you can get a defense late in the draft that could really be excellent value for you. If you're interested in more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. I reply to all my commenters. This is a small channel, so I reply to everybody. Please ask any questions that you got. I love helping you guys out with your fantasy football questions and to help you guys win a championship. I have rankings out for kickers, quarterbacks, and tight ends so far. We will get to running backs and wide receivers over the next few weeks. We also will have mock drafts coming out soon. And you can check out my divisional previews, which I did over the past few weeks as well. So you can check out all that in the description below. And please subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. So, my general strategy for defense, just to give you guys a precursor of how I approach this, I'm generally only looking for one defense to draft in fantasy football. The reason being is that early in the season, I'm trying to prioritize as much running back and wide receiver depth as I can get, because those are the positions that really give you the bang for your buck in terms of the most total points generally come from those positions. You could see more specifics of why that is in some of my previous videos in which I discuss how you would approach these single slot positions, for lack of better words, like quarterback, kicker, tight end. I have videos out for all that, as you can see. But generally for defense, what I'm trying to do is just draft one and try to find one that I think could be valuable. I don't really look to start getting into two defenses until it starts to get into the second half of the season. So at this point, just looking for a defense that could be reliable and steady for me to hopefully help me win the first few weeks of the season. So that turns me to this Excel sheet that I made, which has my tiers and rankings of all the defenses. So before I get specifically into the tiers and talking about each particular team, I want to just give you an orientation to this graph and what it is. So my ranking is how I rank each of the defenses. So you can see the Denver Broncos are number one for me. I will explain in a minute. Then you have the team name, bye week, pretty self-explanatory. Then I go into the opponent that each of these teams are playing in weeks 1, 2, 3, and week 17, which is your championship week for fantasy football. So what this is I have the teams and the matchups that I really like going up against bad offenses highlighted in green. So for example, Denver playing Tennessee in week 1 is a great opening day matchup that I really like for that defense. You notice a lot of these same teams will appear in green because those are the offenses that I generally do not think will be very good for fantasy football and may struggle in this particular matchup. The cells that are highlighted in red, though, are the difficult matchups that I think will present a lot of problems for the defenses because of how good that offense is. So, for example, Buffalo and Baltimore playing each other in week 1, I think that is going to be pretty rough for those two defenses going up against Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, respectively. I think that those defenses will not give you great points for the first week of the season. And then we look at week 17 too, because that's the championship week. So I just want to give you a precursor of that because ultimately that's the week that matters the most in fantasy football. The consensus rank is the next column on the right, and that is essentially what the fantasy football experts rank them as on a consensus, which you can see them broken down individually in terms of ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, and Real-Time Fantasy Sports. Next, you have the ADP column and the ADP comparison. So ADP is the average round that they are going just for each individual defense. And then ADP comparison is my reordering of it to basically, if you take all the defenses in their positions that they were drafted, reordering it based on how I think they will perform based on my rank, and if there is value there if from them moving up or back around, for them being drafted lower than what their actual value will be based on my projected rankings. So With defense, though, when you're looking at ADP, you kind of have to take some of these numbers for the ADP with a grain of salt, because generally defenses, much like kickers, are ranked lower by the experts in terms of their overall value to your fantasy team. However, in fantasy football drafts, there are going to be people reaching for a kicker or for a defense, and that starts off a chain effect of everybody else doing that. So because of that, the ADP is a little bit arbitrary, or not really the best indicator of its true value, because there are going to be people reaching. That's just how it works when you get to draft day. But that being said, I'm going to go into each of these tiers and why I like the defenses that I'm going to discuss, why they're some other ones have bad value. And number one to me in a tier of its own is the Denver Broncos defense. The Broncos defense already was an elite unit last year, with Patrick Surtain as probably the best cornerback in the league. Nick Bonito really came in on his own last season and honestly became a sneaky defensive player of the year candidate. So they have a lot of talent on that defense already. And then they just got better with Talanoa Hufanga getting signed. They also bring in Dre Greenlaw. So this defense got better with some good additions that they added this offseason. And then you look at their opening matchups. They have probably the best two opponents that you can have for a start to your fantasy football season. They are at home against the Tennessee Titans and Cam Ward's first NFL game. Now, I like Cam Ward. I don't think that he's going to... I think he could be useful for fantasy, but I really don't think this is a good matchup for them at all. I see that game being a blowout, and I think Denver will really give you a great performance that week. Then you have week 2, where they are at the Indianapolis Colts. And the Colts, if you've watched Anthony Richardson play quarterback, is extremely erratic. And if you watch Daniel Jones play quarterback, who very well could be starting because Anthony Richardson is already dealing with injuries already, those guys turn the ball over a lot. And this Denver Broncos team will probably feast on that. So you're just looking at these two matchups individually to start off your fantasy football season. That's part of why I have Denver going so high. I think they're already a great unit that got better, but their first two matchups are so juicy that I think you have to take advantage of that, because that will be something that could probably make the difference between you starting off undefeated or not in the beginning of your fantasy football season. Week 3 is a little harder. They get the Chargers. And then week 17, they're at the Kansas City Chiefs. And you may think that that's kind of a tough matchup, but for me personally, I'm not really worried about the Broncos defense going up against the Chiefs. The Chiefs offense last year was not particularly explosive, and I don't think they really got a lot better this season. So I'm not expecting it to be a game in which you're creating multiple turnovers, pick six, stuff like that. But I do think they will be serviceable enough in week 17 that you could still play them. And I think they're going to have great matchups throughout the season where they will be one of the best defenses available. So because of that, Denver Broncos are in a tier of their own, the elite tier, and they're a defense that I would be trying to reach for. Generally in my sleeper 10-team leagues, I've been trying to get them around the 12th or 13th round. And I think that is appropriate to try to take the Denver Broncos defense. They're actually not even ranked as the best defense on Sleeper. It's not on this graph, but I believe Sleeper has them as their third best defense. So Denver, to me, the best value you can get, and they're the ones that I would be most comfortable reaching for. The next tier to me are the very good tier, and these are defenses that I would be comfortable having on my team and rostering should somebody take Denver before me. I think you can pivot to either of these next three and be in a pretty good position to have a reliable defense on your team. And I have them ranked the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Houston Texans. So I love Pittsburgh at the top of that list, and I really thought about moving them up into the Broncos tier as well, but I do have a little bit concern of their secondary, just what that will look like with swapping Minkah Fitzpatrick and Jalen Ramsey. So I don't know exactly how that will look necessarily, but I just think that this defense is so talented. They get the Jets with TJ Watt and all those guys. They will still be solid even despite the secondary. They get the Jets week 1. I think that is a great matchup for them starting off the season. Then they have they don't really have the best matchup the next week with Seattle. That could go either way. New England, I think, is getting a little bit better, but still a good situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then you look at their Week 17 matchup, and they get probably one of the best offenses that you can go up against, best as in worst, but best for fantasy football defenses, in the Cleveland Browns. So you're looking at that in your Week 17 championship at Cleveland. That makes Pittsburgh an extremely attractive defense that I would want to get on draft day. Next to me are the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that this team has a lot of guys that will continue to improve and get better, like Jalen Carter, Cooper DeJean, Mitchell, guys like that, that I think that this defense is going to continue to be good and get better. I just have a little bit of concern of the Eagles versus the Steelers in terms of the Eagles are going to be playing better teams. They get Dallas Week 1. That's not exactly the best matchup. And then in Week 17, they get the Buffalo Bills on the road, which could be good, and I think it could still make them serviceable, but it's not the upside that you get with the Broncos and the Steelers in some of their early and late season matchups that I really like. And then the Houston Texans, another great defense that really came on strong at the end of last season. They get the Rams in Week 1, and I really like that as a defense that you could rely on because the Rams are looking very iffy right now with Matt Stafford's injuries, and you really don't know what Jimmy Garoppolo looks like at this point, should he actually have to start. So I think Houston is extremely attractive as well. They don't have the best matchups the following weeks against Tampa Bay and Jacksonville, and the Chargers are not extremely attractive either as a Week 17 game. But still, these are great defenses, and I think they're great ones that you can pivot to. The next the next four, in the third tier are defenses that are getting drafted pretty high, but I don't really think are great value. And a lot of this has to do with these teams' Week 1 matchups that are really concerning to me. So Detroit is number 5. The 6th team is the Buffalo Bills, Minnesota Vikings, and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I really like Detroit's defense, and I think the addition of Aiden Hutchinson coming back onto the team is going to help them generate a lot of sacks. But they have a pretty brutal schedule really throughout the season because their division has a lot of great offenses. And they also have some challenging matchups as well playing the AFC North. So because of that, they get Green Bay in Week 1. Week 2, they get Chicago, which could be a good matchup. I haven't highlighted Green because I think that, in a game where the Lions are going up against Ben Johnson, I just have a feeling that they're going to kind of fall on their face a little bit, the Chicago Bears. I think that Detroit could feast on them at home, especially being their first home game of the season. And then they get the Baltimore Ravens on the road. So there's a lot of up and down challenging matchups. And I think that's the thing that concerns me with Detroit is that although I love the players that they have, in reality, if they've got some really hard matchups at the beginning of the season, then I don't know if I want to take them to necessarily have some bad performances in those games that I need to get off on a good footing to start the season. Then they get Minnesota in Week 17, which they could have a good offense. It's not really known right now what their offense is going to look like with J.J. McCarthy, but just tough matchups for them. And then especially the Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens I want to highlight because they play each other Week 1, and I think that those are not good matchups for either of them. But then in the case of the Bills, they have pretty tough matchup in Week 17 going up against Philadelphia, and the Ravens get Green Bay. So those are some challenging matchups for those defenses. But what I really like about the Bills and Ravens is keep an eye on if they're dropped after Week 1. It's possible they may be dropped going up against those teams if they don't put up good numbers. But the following weeks they get the Jets, the Buffalo Bills play the Jets, and the Ravens play the Cleveland Browns. So because of that, they could be great streamers to pick up for the following week, but for Week 1, it's not really the best situation for you. The next group of defenses are defenses that are right on the fringe of getting drafted or not, but I think have okay value, but are not in general as good of units as the ones that I just mentioned with tough matchups. So these are ones that could be better, but probably more than likely not ones that I'm going to be attached to and maybe willing to cut for certain stream candidates on a given week. And they are the 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the New York Jets. The 49ers, I think, are a really underrated defense in terms of the fact that they have a pretty easy strength of schedule. If you're looking at last year's opponents, they had a tough season last year, so they're playing a lot of the teams at the bottom of the division. They get Seattle week 1, which is not great, but then they get New Orleans, which is a much better matchup for them. Then Arizona, and then they have Chicago week 17, which we'll see how they look as we progress through the season. But I think the 49ers could be an underrated defense that are really left off a lot of draft boards in certain league formats, going outside the top 12 in ESPN and real-time sports. The Kansas City Chiefs are the next team to me, and they are a great defensive unit, but for fantasy production, they really are not that elite. They're very good at, minimizing big plays, but they don't really create a lot of big plays with turnovers. So we'll see if things change for this next season. But to me, Kansas City is not a defense that I would really be trying to target, but there are going to be some matchups that I really like. Kansas City, much like I've talked about with Buffalo and Baltimore and Detroit, etc., are all getting the best opponents from each division because they finished first. So because of that, that kind of concerns me with relying on the Chiefs all season. The Chargers, I think, are a solid defensive unit. They don't have any elite matchups really to start the season or really to end the season. So they're not really a unit that I would be specifically targeting to hold long term. But Harbaugh is going to instill a great defensive culture there, and I think even with the loss of Joey Bosa, there's still going to be a good defense. And the Jets, much like I talked about with Harbaugh, I think Aaron Glenn is going to make this a good defense. He's going to bring out the best of Sauce Gardner. I think that this defense will be a sneaky one that can be relied upon. And I'm surprised Yahoo has them as low as they do at number 23, and really real-time sports as well. I think this defense has a lot of talent. They just kind of had a mess last season, which I think was mostly contributed to Aaron Rodgers. But now that he's gone, Aaron Glenn is trying to instill the culture on this team. I think this is a very sneaky defense that you can get undrafted that is in the same tier to me as the 49ers and makes my top 12 as defenses that I think you can get pretty late in drafts and still rely upon a lot. The next three are defenses that I think can also be good for streaming purposes. They're going a little bit too high for what I would like, but they are defenses that I think will place next in that list of how I think they will perform. Seattle Seahawks, they have a good defensive mind. Mike McDonald running the team. So because of that, I think that their defense is going to be solid. I don't really love the beginning matchups early in the season, but what I really like about the Seahawks is that you can get them in great matchups to end the season. You have New Orleans in week 3. That's not the end of the season, but I'm just saying the end of my chart. My bad. Week 17, they get the Carolina Panthers, which that could be a great matchup. I think especially as the Panthers kind of wear down through the season, I think there's a good chance that Seattle can have a great game against them in that week 17. Dallas is next to me on the list. Dallas has some interesting players to me. Will Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland be great cornerbacks again? We'll have to see. But I think their matchup against Philadelphia to start the season is rough, and their matchup against Washington in week 17 is also really rough. But again, much like Baltimore and Buffalo, they got a great matchup in week 2 against the Giants. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the Cowboys. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have some good defensive players as well. They're not a great fantasy producing defense, though. Don't have some really elite matchups necessarily. Miami could be a kind of a mess by week 17 when Tampa Bay plays them. But on paper, they're a great offense. So don't love Tampa Bay, but they are in consideration for me as well. The next two are defenses that are going too high in drafts that I'm not really interested in based on what value you're probably getting them at. And in my opinion, I would rather take the ones in the next tier. And they're the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. So like I talked with Detroit, the NFC North is a tough division. There's a lot of good offenses there. They do not have the best matchups either, getting to start the season and to end the season. So Chicago gets Minnesota and Detroit to begin the season. That's not a great slate. And then Green Bay gets Detroit and Washington. And then even worse in week 17 they get Baltimore. So because of that, don't really love Green Bay as a defense I'd be taking either. But I really would pay attention to their week 3 game though against Cleveland, because that is great. It's possible they may be dropped after 2 weeks of what I think will not be great performances. The next group are the underrated sleepers, and these are the defenses that I really like that I think will give you some great value among undrafted defenses. The one that I like the most because of its early season matchups are the Arizona Cardinals. They start out the season with New Orleans playing Tyler Shuck in his first NFL game, most likely. I think that will be an excellent game for the Cardinals defense. And then they get the Carolina Panthers at home coming across the country. And then, although I do think Carolina will be a little bit better, they are still pretty clearly, in my opinion, one of the 3rd worst offenses in the NFL. So, because of that, they have a great schedule to start the season. They also have a very underrated defense in general that was pretty consistent through a stretch of the season last year when they were kind of... The Cardinals had a pretty good run in October and November until the wheels kind of fell off. But I think that the way they start the season is great. The thing I don't like about them is that they're playing Cincinnati in week 17. So they're not a defense that I think can really be an elite game-changing defense. But if you're looking at an undrafted defense that has great matchups to start the season, it would be the Arizona Cardinals, in my opinion. The next would be the Washington Commanders. So if you take away the Green Bay game in week 2, they get the Giants in week 1, which I think is one of the best matchups that you can get as an undrafted defense. I would be all over the Commanders for that week. And then they get the Las Vegas Raiders at home. I believe that's a Monday night game. I have to double check. But that's another good matchup to me for the Raiders coming across the country against the Commanders. I think that those are some good matchups you can get early in the season that can make the Commanders' defense very intriguing. So because of that, the Commanders added some good talent. They got Von Miller on the defense. They've improved their secondary as well. I think this team is going to be an underrated defense that you could have for fantasy. Cincinnati, I don't love their defense, but they are playing the Browns week 1, so just keep that in mind. I think that's maybe a 1 week and then drop type situation. New England, kind of the same thing. They get the Vegas Raiders. And I think that in general, I go with the Cincinnati ranking higher than the New England Patriots because of that week 1 matchup. I generally like the Patriots defense more, but I think there's going to be more times than not that the Patriots are going to be right on the fringe of drafting and rostering, and you're going to be playing matchups. But they do have some good matchups later in the season, especially week 17 against the Jets. And then the Miami Dolphins. So I don't love this defensive unit, but what I will say is that they've got 2 great matchups to start the season. They got the Colts, as I mentioned. We don't know what their quarterback situation looks like, and they're both turnover prone. And then you got the New England Patriots, which although there's a lot of buzz coming out of the camp there with Drake May, they still need to prove that they are an NFL effective offense. And I think you just look at their roster, they really don't have a lot of elite weapons outside of Diggs. So because of that, I think that New England could be a sneaky matchup for Miami, and that can make their defense playable. The next 3 are defenses that I don't like early in the season, but I really like their Week 17 matchups. So these are just ones to store away at the back of your head. Keep these matchups in mind because I think that could make these defenses intriguing, especially as we see what their units look like throughout the season. The Tennessee Titans, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the New Orleans Saints. So the Titans in Week 17 play the New Orleans Saints. I think, of course, the Saints are playing the Titans. So I think that could be a great matchup for fantasy purposes both ways. I think those are rookie quarterbacks. We don't know what they will look like at the end of the season. We don't know what some of the other offensive players like Calvin Ridley or Kamara, if they will be on those respective teams at that point, or if they'd be shut down or traded. So because of that, I think that particular game is one that I really like for Week 17. And then the Las Vegas Raiders get the New York Giants, which their quarterback situation also has a lot of turnover-prone players. It may be Jackson Dart by that point. But I like that pass rush going up against the Giants at home in week 17. I think that makes their defense very intriguing as well. The defenses that were not ranked in this particular video are the New York Giants, the LA Rams, the Cleveland Browns, the Indianapolis Colts, the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I did not rank those defenses because there just really are not great matchups that I really like early in the season or in week 17 to really include them in this video. I think I wouldn't rule out the potential of some of those defenses being good stream matchups given the opponent, but I'm not really interested in them early in the season, and especially not in draft process. So that's all that I've got for this video. Stay tuned this upcoming week. I will be doing a sleeper mock. I will go through what I would do in the 101, the 105, and the 110 positions so you get an idea of what players I'd be targeting at certain points in the draft. We will also do running back strategy too. So take a look and keep an eye out for that video too. All right, well, that's all that I've got. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.